For generations, the US-Canada border was a symbol of peace, a line on the map that represented not division, but friendship and trust between two nations. It was an open line that united communities, families, and economies, allowing people to move freely and businesses to thrive on both sides. Every day, thousands crossed for work, shopping, or family visits, rarely pausing to consider the invisible line beneath their feet. The border was more of a bridge than a barrier, woven into the daily lives of those who lived nearby. But today, that era of openness is under threat, as new realities reshape what this border means. New government policies, rising diplomatic tensions, and even environmental crises have transformed this once porous boundary into a real, tangible barrier. Security infrastructure now dominates crossings that were once little more than a handshake and a wave. The ease of movement that defined the relationship for over a century is fading fast. Long lines, stricter checks, and uncertainty have replaced the casual crossings of the past. The Peace Arch's inscription, "May these gates never be closed," now feels more like a desperate plea than a confident promise as barriers rise around this historic monument. The border, once a symbol of unity and cooperation, is now a site of tension and division, with protests and heightened security becoming more common. The impact is felt in every aspect of life along the border, from struggling local economies to families kept apart by new restrictions and physical barriers. As of August 2025, the US-Canada border stands as a friendship tested, a bond strained by forces beyond its control, and a future that remains uncertain for all who call this region home. The shift began with controversial policy changes on both sides. The U.S. travel ban, enacted in June 2025 after a major security incident, restricted entry for nationals from 12 countries, sparking confusion and fear even among those not directly targeted. Canada, meanwhile, imposed strict internal travel controls due to devastating wildfires, complicating cross-border travel further. Both countries reduced border service hours, making legal crossings harder and shrinking the window for routine travel. Canada's $1.3 billion investment in border security technology, matched by U.S. measures, has hardened the frontier. The result? A patchwork of barriers, turning every crossing into a potential ordeal. The human cost of these new realities is most visible in the faces and stories of those who find themselves caught between two worlds, families and young people whose lives are shaped by the border in ways they never expected. For many ordinary families, the border is no longer just a line on a map, but a barrier that disrupts daily life, cherished traditions, and long-held dreams. Plans that once seemed simple, like visiting relatives, attending family events, or taking a weekend trip, are now fraught with uncertainty and anxiety. The Tremble family from Quebec, for example, canceled their annual Vermont trip, fearing discrimination at the border due to the mother's Iranian heritage. Their story is just one among many, as families with diverse backgrounds now weigh the risks of crossing. Car crossings from Canada to the US have dropped by 33%, and air travel by 22%, numbers that represent not just statistics, but missed reunions, lost opportunities, and the slow erosion of cross-border ties that once felt unbreakable. The Girl Guides of Canada suspended all US trips, citing safety and inclusion concerns. For many young girls, these trips were a rite of passage, a chance to explore, learn, and build friendships across borders. This decision has been echoed by school boards canceling educational visits, leaving students disappointed, and teachers struggling to explain why these enriching experiences are no longer possible. These cancellations threaten to create a lasting psychological divide for young Canadians, who may grow up seeing the border not as a gateway, but as a wall that keeps them apart from their neighbors. For decades, cross-border trips fostered understanding, friendship, and a sense of shared community. Now, those opportunities are vanishing, replaced by uncertainty and distance. The risk is clear: a generation that sees the US not as a neighbor and partner, but as a place of exclusion, where they feel unwelcome and misunderstood. The border is hardening not just physically, but in the minds and hearts of those who will shape the future, leaving scars that may take years to heal. As the US border becomes harder to cross, Canadians are turning inward, embracing the Travel Canada movement. Social media is filled with images from Banff, Prince Edward Island, and Old Quebec, as families choose domestic adventures over cross-border uncertainty. This shift is both a show of national pride and a practical response to new barriers. Tourism boards have seized the moment, promoting Canada's natural wonders and boosting local economies. National parks are seeing record visitors and small towns are thriving, Yet this inward turn also deepens the emotional distance from the U.S. Fewer cross-border trips mean fewer personal connections, quietly reinforcing the divide. The Travel Canada movement, born of necessity, may be cementing the very separation it seeks to escape. Nowhere is the impact of a hardened border felt more than in the small towns that straddle it. For generations, these communities have thrived on the easy flow of people, goods, and ideas across the invisible line. Families, friends, and businesses have grown together, often treating the border as little more than a formality. Once busy main streets in places like Blaine, Washington, and Plattsburgh, New York, are now quiet, their economies reeling from the loss of Canadian visitors. The familiar bustle of cross-border shoppers and weekend travelers has vanished, leaving behind a silence that feels unnatural to locals. Local businesses, motels, restaurants, and shops are struggling or closing, unable to survive without cross-border customers. Many owners who once relied on a steady stream of visitors now face mounting bills and dwindling hope. The ripple effects are felt everywhere, from the corner diner to the family-run hardware store. Supply chains are disrupted, costs are rising, and jobs are disappearing. Factories and warehouses that depended on seamless trade now sit idle, and workers worry about their futures as shifts are cut and paychecks shrink. These towns were built on economic interdependence, with Canadians and Americans working and shopping across the line. The border was never just a boundary, it was a lifeline, connecting families and fueling local economies. The new policies have severed a vital economic artery, leaving communities on both sides in crisis. What was once a symbol of cooperation has become a barrier, dividing neighbors and stalling progress. The pain is personal: lost jobs, shuttered businesses, and a sense of shared prosperity slipping away. For many, the border's closure means more than economic hardship. It's a loss of identity and community spirit. The border's closure is not just a diplomatic issue, it's a local disaster. Town leaders scramble for solutions while residents voice their fears and frustrations at emergency meetings, hoping for relief that may not come soon. Billions in trade and millions of jobs are at stake. The longer the border remains closed, the deeper the wounds for these towns and the people who call them home. The quiet streets of border towns are a stark warning. When the gates close, communities suffer first. Their struggle is a reminder that borders are not just lines on a map, but lifelines for real people and real lives. The most lasting damage may be to the friendship and trust that once defined the US-Canada relationship. The border is becoming a psychological barrier, replacing familiarity with suspicion. Canadians increasingly see the US as unpredictable and unwelcoming, while Americans view Canada's new restrictions as a lack of cooperation. This shift in perception is dangerous, fueling nationalism and making collaboration harder. The decline in cultural and educational exchanges, like the Girl Guides decision, is erasing opportunities for young people to build cross-border friendships. Without these connections, future generations may rely on divisive narratives instead of shared experiences. The weakening of personal ties threatens the stability and prosperity of both nations. The US-Canada partnership has been a model of cooperation. Now, that legacy is at risk. The border's hardening is slowly dismantling a century-old friendship. At this crossroads, the future of the US-Canada border depends on renewed diplomacy and shared values. Leaders must recognize the damage done, not just to economies but to the relationship itself, and reopen lines of communication. Both nations need to address security and environmental concerns collaboratively, minimizing disruption for ordinary people. A joint task force to de-escalate tensions and simplify regulations could signal a new beginning. Rebuilding trust means reinvesting in cultural and educational exchanges, especially for youth and families. The choice is clear: let the border become a wall, or restore it as a symbol of friendship and unity. History shows that even the deepest divides can be bridged, if there is the will to do so.